And here we go. We are live, and I have another figure from the New Adventures of Batman, the spin-off line from the Batman Classic Television Series by Mcfarlane Toys. And this one is Commissioner Gordon. So, if you are somebody who sees this figure and you're like, yeah, I've got to have that, I've got to say that you are you must be a true blue, dyed in the wool, hardcore Batman fan. Because this is not even like the cool version of Commissioner Gordon. This isn't even like, like you Batman the Animated Series Commissioner Gordon. It's not Gary Oldman Commissioner Gordon. It's not Jeffrey Wright Commissioner Gordon, which not fond of that movie, but I thought he was good as Commissioner Gordon, so I'll say that. I don't think he was commissioner yet, though. He was like Lieutenant Gordon, but whatever. You know what I mean. This is like just he's got no trench coat, he's got no gun, he's just some bureaucrat in a gray suit. Oh, and he comes with Batmite, so we're going to talk about Batmite for a little bit. So we've already been over the packaging on these in some of the previous episodes, but it does have like a close up of the digital render of Commissioner Gordon, and images of the Bat Cave with the dynamic duo and the Batmobile. I still need to get the Bat Cave and the Batmobile, don't I? Yeah, I certainly do. So I feel like I'm about to sneeze. So fair warning, I'm about to sneeze. If don't want to surprise anybody. This is gonna be loud. They're always loud with me. And then the tickle's just kind of going away now. So don't you just hate that when you get that tickle and you're like, I know I'm gonna sneeze. I know I'm gonna sneeze, and you're just mentally preparing yourself so that you're gonna sneeze, and then nothing. That's it, nothing. So and then probably like later on, I'll just sneeze and not be expecting it at all. So he's the last of these that I currently have. I still need to get the Joker and the Riddler, and that will complete that set. Maybe I'll try to order one or both of those this week. But I also have from the classic TV series line, I have Egghead. So I'm looking forward to opening him up. He was probably my favorite original villain that they made up for the show. Speaking of original villains that they made up for the show, this guy, also one of the more popular of that particular category, King Tut. So two great actors here with Vincent Price and Victor Buono. Both brought a lot to their performances. They're also like I think like two of the original characters that we see return a lot. I think the only other one I can think of offhand that was original character that came back was Carolyn Jones as Marcia, Queen of Diamonds, and of course you'd want to have as much Carolyn Jones as possible. She's awesome. And then of course Lord Deathman. And I know some of you like there's basically going to be two categories of people watching this: people who are like, "Ooh, awesome, Lord Deathman," and people who are like, "Who is Lord Deathman?" I don't remember that guy at all. But he's got an interesting history. We'll get into discussing Lord Deathman. You can see that he's one of the Batman 66 figures, which means that he's from the comic book Batman 66. Whereas characters that were created for the television series, it says Batman Classic Television Series. And of course, going back to the guy we're here for in the first place, one's created for New Adventures of Batman, the Filmation cartoon that came out in 1977. This was Filmation's second cartoon. Now, I keep saying that they reused the model sheets for this show, and they did kind of tweak them like a little bit. Like when I was looking at the Batgirl figure, I was talking about how like her eyeball on that was just drawn as like the eyelash and then a black pupil and didn't have whites of the eyes in there. But actually, I was incorrect about that. On the New Adventures of Batman, they actually did updated the some of the characters slightly, so they had whites around the eyes. So Bruce Wayne, Dick Grayson, Barbara Gordon, they all got the newer looking eyes. But other than that, it's pretty much the same as the ones from the previous cartoon. I do believe that Commissioner Gordon had a new model sheet, but it's been a while since I've watched like the 1960s one, so I could be mistaken about that. But I do believe that they did redesign Commissioner Gordon somewhat, and he has a little bit more of a Jim Aparo look to him, but still not with the trench coat that you oftentimes think of Jim Gordon as having in the more modern stories. When they did the revamp of Batman in the early 70s after the TV show went off the air, and they were trying to get away from it and reestablish Batman as being more like the earlier days of the comic book, where he was a grim and serious vigilante, and not so much with the shark repellent, the Batusi, and the sometimes you just can't get rid of a bomb. Not that style of Batman. And one of the things that he did was to make Jim Gordon more of a cop. And in fact, one of the things they did was they gave him the name Jim Gordon. Commissioner Gordon actually never had a first name for like the first 30 years or so they were doing this comic book. He was always just Commissioner Gordon. You'll notice they never refer to him by his first name on the television series, for example. And in fact, the name Jim Gordon was such a recent addition, it didn't even make it into Tom Mankiewicz's screenplay of The Batman. Yes, his was going to be called The Batman. This was the one that would have come, they started working on in the late 70s, pretty much immediately after Superman the movie, which is why they got Tom Mankiewicz, because he was the guy who really was the screenwriter of Superman the movie. But he was called David Gordon in that, interestingly enough. But there was some efforts made in the comics to make Jim Gordon more of an active participant and less just some bureaucrat that sat behind the desk. And you can see that this is just some bureaucrat that would sit behind the desk. Although, I will say that even though that's the appearance of this character, he actually is a bit more active on this show than you would expect. Like, for example, on the episode where Catwoman frames Batgirl for stealing a device that makes fabric out of garbage, he does lead the manhunt after Batgirl. And I imagine that's the sort of thing where it's like, obviously we want to have the conflict of father versus daughter in there and, that sort of thing. So that obviously is where that came from. But it is nice to see Jim Gordon get out of the office and do some stuff, especially since, as I've mentioned before, Alfred, for whatever reason, was not a character on this show. And that's the weirdest thing about a show that's already very weird. But but to not have Alfred in your Batman show, just strange. And having this little guy in there doesn't make up for the loss of Alfred. So it does come with a little figurine of Batmite. He does not look to be articulated at all. It looks to be just like a slug, like a little figurine that's just like one solid piece of plastic. But you can't really do a New Adventures of Batman line without including Batmite, since he was one of the main characters on the show. Literally, when the show starts out, you have Batman, Robin, and Batmite in the Batcave, and Batman says, "This is Batman," and Robin, the boy wonder, and me too, Batmite. So they want you to know Batmite is on that show. And that's one of those things where, like, I kind of felt like, even though this show was made in the late 70s, it was really more based on comics of like the late 50s and early 60s. So it's kind of an odd duck as far as that goes. Like, even some of the episodes seem like they're directly based on comics of the time. Like the Moon Man episode, that was based on actually an issue of World's Finest. Only since they didn't have the rights to Superman, they left him out. So anyway, let's have a look at Batmite. And he is indeed one solid, non-articulated piece of plastic. I told you that was coming. Maybe the head might be articulated, but it's hard for me to tell. It does look like it's a separate piece, if nothing else. And if it is a separate piece, they might as well have articulated it, but I don't think they did. And you notice that his head is like a little more narrow from front to back than you would think. he kind of almost reminds me of like a figurine, like back in the 80s, you might have gotten cereal, where, they were kind of trying to save on the plastic, so they made the characters a bit more narrow from front to back than they really should be. So Batmite was a character that first appeared, as I said before, in early Silver Age comics. And he was basically like an imp from the fifth dimension, like Mr. Mxyzptlk. And I don't know if it was supposed to be the same dimension that Mr. Mxyzptlk was from, or if it was just a different dimension. But later on, of course, they established that Batmite and Mxyzptlk were from the same dimension, because I guess it didn't make much sense to have these characters, more than one fifth dimension that these characters came from to annoy Batman or Superman, respectively. But of course, Mxyzptlk came first, and Batmite came second. And I do believe what happened is that whenever Batmite was introduced, oh great, I'm going to sneeze again. Okay, so basically at that time, there was this effort, because Batman comics weren't selling as well as they used to. And of course, there was like the whole thing with, I'm going to sneeze again. There it went. It's gone now. It's so annoying. It's so annoying. It's like the opposite of the lever. You know it's going to come. It's hovering over you, and you just eat it. Anyway, so there was some effort, because Superman comics were doing gangbusters at the time, and make him a little more like Superman. Have him, fight aliens like the way Superman fights aliens. And it makes sense for Superman to fight aliens, because for one thing, he's an alien himself, and for another thing, like, he's a guy with superpowers, so you want to have like high stakes villains for him to be up against, your Brainiacs, your Bizarros. Not to mention, your average alien from outer space that pops up occasionally. But I'm guessing, since they noticed Mxyzptlk stories did really well for Superman, we'll make our own Mxyzptlk for Batman. And the main difference between Batmite and Mxyzptlk is Mxyzptlk was a prankster who, was out to get Superman's goat, and it was always like, this sort of thing where his main motivation was to kind of get on Superman's nerves and make him look like an idiot, and Superman had to trick him into saying his name backwards and going back to the fifth dimension and making him look like an idiot. So, but on the other hand, Batmite, even though he is kind of based on Mxyzptlk, they did think to make him a little different in some ways. And instead of being like an adversarial character that is against Superman, Batmite, as you might guess from the fact that he calls himself Batmite and he wears a Batman-like costume, is actually a fan of Batman and uses his fifth dimensional powers to come to our universe and try to help the Caped Crusader. But unfortunately, despite his unlimited powers, he's actually kind of incompetent and usually winds up making the situation worse than it actually is. So this was a character that appeared a lot throughout the late 50s and early 60s. I believe he first appeared in the late 50s. And later on, after this series, he would appear on the Batman the Brave and the Bold cartoon series, in which he was voiced by one Paul Reubens, a.k.a. Pee Wee Herman himself. So that was pretty cool. So he's got an interesting history to him. And sometime in the 1990s, in the series Legends of the Dark Knight, they actually did an issue about Batmite, and it's really good. So I would suggest anybody who's interested in Batmite, check out those episodes of The Brave and the Bold, and check out that issue of Legends of the Dark Knight. And if you can find some of the early comic book appearances, they're definitely worth looking into. So basically, like, kind of the trend in cartoon series at that time was to give your main characters some kind of wacky magical imp character that caused problems, like the bird character in the Brady Kids, or that sort of thing. So that's probably where the inspiration came from. That, hey, there was this goofy little guy in the comics like 20 years ago. Why don't we just take him and plop him in there, and kids will like that 'cause he's a wacky little guy. And you know, I'm sure I like Batmite actually because I was like small enough at the time. This show came out in like 1977, so when I saw it, I probably would have been more than it was rerun for a couple of years. I remember seeing it when I was like 3 or 4 or something. But I actually kind of liked the character. I thought he was funny. But that's the audience they were going for, is like small children, like elementary school age and younger. And I would imagine if you were an older, more sophisticated Batman fan who was currently enjoying comic books drawn by the likes of Neil Adams, Bernie Wright, and Marshall Rogers, Batman is a dark and serious vigilante who doesn't have room in his gritty world for fifth dimensional imps and homemade cosplay. So I'm sure like a lot of the teenagers who were even if they'd enjoyed the Adam West show when they were kids, now they wanted their Batman to be serious and gritty and all that kind of thing. And this was not a show that's made for them though. So Batmite does vary in his appearance from what he looked like in the comic book, and most of that is in the color scheme. You can see that Batmite has green skin, yellow eyes, and an outfit that's in various shades of purple. So he's got purple cowl, purple cape, no scalloping on the cape, purple shorts, and then like underneath he's got like not even underneath, the shirt kind of laps over it. So he's got like a lavender shirt, lavender tights underneath the shorts, and then kind of a pinkish boots and gloves, which I think on the show is like a true pink. It's like here it's kind of a lavender that airs on the side of pink, but on the show I believe it was just straight pink. So I'm guessing whoever did the coloring for this show was the same guy who did I don't know for certain, I had to look it up, but the same guy who was in charge of the coloring for the Filmation Star Trek cartoon of a few years earlier, and that guy really liked to use the color pink. So if there was something on that show he could have made pink, he made it pink. Oh, Tribbles? Oh, they're pink. There was never a single pink Tribble in the entire TOS episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, but they're all pink when they show up in the Filmation cartoon. So he's probably the guy who came up with this color scheme for Batmite. Oh, and you can see that Batmite has green skin, whereas he was just kind of like a normal Caucasian skin color on the show or on the comic book. In the comic book, his outfit was colored the same way as Batman's. So blue cowl, blue cape, blue shorts, blue gloves and boots, and had a gray shirt with a yellow utility belt that was buckled kind of sloppily, and he didn't have any tights, so it was just Caucasian legs underneath. But other than that, he was drawn pretty similarly to this. Just the shape of the eyes was different because in the comics the whites of his eyes were more sort of triangular shaped, like you kind of think of Batman's as being, and here you can see they're round and circular, and he's got eyebrows on the cowl, give him a little more expression for the animation. So I'll try to remember to come back to him in a little bit and have him with Batman and Robin so we can see all three of them together. Let's move on to the actual main part of the package, which is Commissioner Gordon. Because I've talked about Batmite an awful lot. I think I'm going to edit the title so it has Batmite in the title. I didn't think to do that when I was typing it out, but we might as well. So let's go ahead and get him out of the package. He did have the dreaded double rubber tab around his waist, which I hate those. It's like, I hate the rubber tabs. I hate the double rubber tabs twice as much. So here we go. We got Commissioner Gordon out of the package. And one thing I'm noticing about him immediately is he's got some wrinkles in his hands that look kind of like he's wearing gloves, even though he does have Caucasian colored hands. I don't know if we can make this out, but he actually has darts in the back of his hands, like darts and gloves. So I'm gonna, let's see, I know I've got them here somewhere. Get the Joker out. I'm gonna compare the hands. And yes, indeed, I do believe that he uses the same hands as the Joker, but they just kind of colored him in Caucasian skin rather than glove color. And it looks like the entire arm is reused from the Joker, and it looks like the entire legs are reused from the Joker. And that strikes me as odd that they reuse the hands, because we know they already have some bare hands that came with Two-Face. So why not just use those hands again? That's kind of a strange choice. Like, were the pegs a different size? Maybe you guys should have made the pegs the same size so you could just, reuse those hands again. So the jacket is one solid piece. It does not look like it's removable at all. It's probably one of those things where, like, you have to, like with a G.I. Joe, if you wanted to remove it, maybe heat up the whole body. This might be a plastic that could do that and pull the arms out. Just make sure you pull them like where you're gripping the joint and everything. And unfortunately, where the rubber tab was holding him into the box, I don't know if you can make that out, but there is a little bit of a mark here. I don't know if that'll come out. It's not that noticeable, but I can still see it if I'm looking for it. So, but yeah, a little bit of a mark there where the rubber tab was holding him in, and there are some spots up here at the shoulder. I'm guessing where he was in the little plastic insert, and I don't think it's coming across on the camera, but where it's just slightly glossy, where it kind of ruined the matte finish of the paint. So let's talk a little bit about his articulation. And the glasses are a separate piece, but they're glued on, and they're like a really soft, rubbery plastic. But I can kind of pry them up and see his eyeballs a little bit. So articulation-wise, head rotates all the way around. And I'm pretty sure all that's new on this figure is just the head and the torso. You can look up about that far, and look down about that far. So Gordon actually probably has about the best range of motion that I've seen on one of these figures so far, as far as looking up and down. Arm rotates all the way around this way. Arms move up about that far. So he's got about the same range of motion, again, as the Joker, since these are reused arms from the Joker. And then he does have a waist articulation, so we can turn the waist probably all the way around, but I'm not going to bother because the suit jacket's going to get in the way anyway. And it is kind of a soft, rubbery material. It's not like the Joker's tailcoat where like it was really very rigid. And it looks like his legs can move up about that far. And since it is the softer, rubbery plastic on the suit jacket, it does hinder his articulation somewhat, but not as much as you might think. And then, of course, the knees bend down about this far. So he can sit at a desk if you've got a desk for him to sit at and just be a bureaucrat. So and then the legs rotate around that way too at the knee. And I forgot to talk about the elbow articulation. So his elbows bend up about that far. Again, these are reused from the Joker, so they spin around like that. And then the wrist articulation, the wrists rotate all the way around with these strange flesh-colored gloves he's wearing. So there we go. Now, like I said, for fans of the Silver Age comic books and earlier, this is pretty much that version of Commissioner Gordon, where he was just kind of some bureaucrat who sat at a desk most of the time and would call Batman and Robin if there was any trouble. But on the cartoon, he actually did get out of the office and go do some things sometimes. I like the way they did Gordon on the New Adventures of Batman. He's actually probably one of the characters that was more well handled on that show. like, Batman and Robin and Batgirl, they're all fine, but there's nothing really to write home about as far as their characterization. It's not like they do anything like groundbreaking with those characters. The one exception I can think of that out of the episodes from when I've been rewatching them is that there's a bit of depth to the episode where Batgirl, like I said, gets framed by Catwoman, and she has to like basically become a fugitive and try to prove her innocence, and of course her dad is the one leading the manhunt against her. And it's like I would have liked to have seen more stuff like that out of the series. I thought that was pretty interesting, but it's not really fair of me to expect this series to be anything more than what it was, which was entertainment made for small children in the late 1970s. And most of the cartoons at that time were just kind of like these Scooby-Doo knockoffs, basically. Even Super Friends started out as a Scooby-Doo knockoff, weirdly enough. So I think with the New Adventures of Batman, Filmation was starting to kind of, that was when they were starting to dip their toe back into the action adventure type stuff that they'd become known for in the 60s. But of course, parents groups had to ruin all that, and then they kind of shifted their focus to things like Archie and Groovy Ghoulies, and that stuff was fun and everything. But really, I kind of feel like action adventure was always kind of Filmation's real bread and butter. So they started to do Tarzan, and I think when Tarzan was successful, then they said, well, let's bring back some of the superheroes. Let's bring back Batman. And I suspect since Batman was the most recent character that Filmation had done, Superman was the first, and then Aquaman and the other DC cartoons they had followed shortly after, and then Batman in I think 1968 or 69. Whenever the Adam West show went off the air, they were able to snatch up the rights to Batman. But I think since he was the most recent one, they probably had some kind of clause or something in their contract where they were able to do another Batman show. It was probably something that DC didn't really have any control over, because it was it doesn't seem to me like they would want like a competing show to Super Friends, because DC themselves had a lot invested in Super Friends. But yeah, so I don't think that the New Adventures of Batman was the best that Filmation had to offer at the time, but it was fun. I think it's probably worth going back and watching for a lark, and especially if you're a fan of Adam West and Burt Ward, it's great to hear them doing the voices of the dynamic duo again. So even when I was a little kid, I liked the voice of Batman on this cartoon better than the one on Super Friends. And I didn't know it was the same guy from the live action show. I just thought, to me, that's more like what Batman sounds like in my head. More like what I think of Batman is sounding like anyway, even at that early age. So yeah, it's a good thing they have this generic suit body. I can see them reusing this for like Alfred, if they ever get around doing a proper Alfred for the 66 TV series. Even if they don't, I could probably get a second one of these and paint the suit black. And I have the Alan Napier Alfred head from the Mattel Alfred figure that came with all those different heads. So, and I don't like to use it on that Alfred figure because he didn't really wear a tuxedo all that often on the show. I wanted one where he was wearing like a plain suit, and I was thinking about getting actually the Two-Face / Clark Kent mold that they used for DC superheroes, and seeing if maybe I could repaint that into a 66 Alfred. But I might just wind up doing one of these if I can get a hold of one of these. That might work pretty well. Of course, like Alfred on the show was already like a guy with white hair and a mustache and glasses, so honestly wouldn't look too different from this one. So let's go ahead and we'll have some comparisons here. So we gotta, of course, have Commissioner Gordon and his daughter. He doesn't know it's his daughter. So, but yeah. So there's Commissioner Gordon with Batgirl. And here is Commissioner Gordon with Batman himself. and he's a little bit taller than Batman, which is to be expected because, like I said, this is reusing the legs from Cesar Romero's Joker, and Cesar Romero actually was taller than Adam West, so that does actually make sense. And if you were to reuse this body for Alfred, like I suggested, Alan Napier was taller than Adam West, and Adam West wasn't a short guy; he was like 6'2". So yeah, they were just particularly tall individuals, Cesar Romero and Alan Napier. And then here you can see the height comparison. Joker and Commissioner Gordon are the same height. So there he is with the Topps trading card Joker. So you can see the comparison with the arms and legs that they share. And let's go ahead and get Batman and Batmite together. So that's what they look like together. And go ahead and get Robin in there too. So there's our New Adventures Robin. And Mr. Freeze is freezing on that stuff in there. The Mr. Freeze gun that I've been working on, I still need to do some painting on it and some other things. But yeah, there's all three of them together. So that's what that looks like. So I still have two more figures from this line that I need to get, which one is the Joker, which I absolutely love that design of the Joker. Like, even if I weren't a fan of the Filmation cartoons, I do really like the designs of the characters. I think the designs are great. They've very much got that Carmine Infantino kind of feel to them, very much based on his artwork of the mid 60s to late 60s, which was kind of the dominating look for Batman in the comics of that time. And it's kind of like I've observed before. It's kind of surprising, I think, how well that look translates with the Adam West body there. But Commissioner Gordon definitely gets a recommend from me. It's not too often that Commissioner Gordon gets an action figure, and I think this is a pretty decent one. I know some people would probably prefer to have a Gordon with the trench coat and the gun, the more Frank Miller kind of Commissioner Gordon. So, like I said, around this time in the comics, there was some efforts to kind of try to reinvent Gordon and make him more of an active character and not so much of just some guy who tells Batman what the problem is so Batman can go fix it. But I don't think that it really became the Commissioner Gordon that we know until Frank Miller did the character in Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One, and I think that's where the Commissioner Gordon that we know and love today really came from. That's certainly the Commissioner Gordon that was played by Gary Oldman in the Dark Knight trilogy, and that is my favorite version of the character is Gary Oldman's version. So maybe I'll try to dig the Gary Oldman Commissioner Gordon out of storage and do some comparison pics between them later on. I think that might be interesting to see. So anyway, that's pretty much it for Commissioner Gordon. He gets a recommend. All the figures in this line get a recommend from me. Like if it's your cup of tea. I know some people will look at him and be like, I'm not into the Silver Age stuff. I'm more into the modern type of Batman. And if that's the case, obviously these aren't made for you. But if you're somebody like me, who it presses just the right nostalgia button. Like I said, we were already on the Neil Adams Batman in the comics, but that does not mean that the Carmine Infantino version of Batman did not still have some cultural relevance. And you were still seeing this version of Batman on a lot of merchandise at the time. Like I remember having a glass that came from like Pizza Hut, and it had the shot of Batman on it that Carmine drew with him swinging on the bat rope and waving at the viewer. And that was a piece that I remember. So yeah, we'd see Carmine's Batman still on a lot of stuff, even in the post Neil Adams era. So it was still relevant to me anyway. So I've got a lot of affection for this particular version of Batman. But anyway, that's pretty much it for Commissioner Gordon. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. All the fun YouTube stuff down below. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this character. Let me know what you think about this figure. So I know a lot of people are just happy to have a Commissioner Gordon figure in general. And like I said, even if you collect like DC Universe Classics or something like that, I think this would fit in really well with those. So that's pretty much it. We'll talk to you next time. Let me go ahead and click where it says end stream, and click again where it says end stream.